in 2016, the Duffer Brothers created a tabletop RPG for their hit show Stranger Things. Since then, that tabletop RPG has spun out into its own franchise and become a huge success. That game was called Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons was actually created by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, and was first published in 1974 by Tactical Studies Rule, who continued to publish it until 1997, when Wizards of the Coast took over. Dungeons and Dragons was, and still is, a big hit, with its world influencing almost everything that touches the fantasy genre. Cartoons like Adventure Time have taken inspiration from the world of Dungeons and Dragons, with its very own lich. And video games like Dark Souls use monsters like mimics, which originated in D&D's first monster manual. But I don't think any piece of media is more clearly inspired by the tabletop RPG than the 2023 film Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. Produced by Paramount Pictures and directed by Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daly. Everything about this film screams Hollywood cash grab. Dungeons and Dragons is at its most popular maybe ever at this time. A major studio is writing the check, and Hasbro keeps talking about making a cinematic universe with Uno and G.I. Joe. But the film, surprisingly, is a lot of fun, and it's very faithful to the game. But how exactly is the film influenced by the game's lore and mechanics? And how do they service the story, making it feel like a real D&D campaign? Well, let's find out. Honor Among Thieves follows Edgin, as he plans a heist that will save the kingdom and his daughter from a power-hungry wizard, and Hugh Grant. Joining him on his mission is Holga the Barbarian, Simon the Sorcerer, and Doric the Druid. Many of the film's plot points take inspiration directly from the tabletop game, when the group is trying to find out information about the Helmet of Disjunction. They go to what remains of a battle fought over the helmet, because Simon has a magical item that lets him cast Speak with Dead. In the film, the spell follows the same rules as the game, and it results in a hilarious sequence, with each corpse having a 5-question limit.
Did that count as a question?
Yes.
Damn it. Only answer when I talk to you, okay?
Yes.
Why did you say okay at the end of that?
I didn't.
I think this section shows how comfortable the filmmakers were working in the world, as they didn't just use the spell as a gag, but had it actively involved in the story. The writers clearly did their homework, as many items from the game are fun references like Simon's Bag of Holding. That's why Edgin keeps handing him things. But I don't think any item plays as important of a role in the story as the aforementioned Helmet of Disjunction. After an incredible sequence showcasing Doric's wild shape ability, which I will be talking about later, she reports back to the group. The treasure they're looking for is held behind a magical seal that Simon wouldn't be able to break. But he mentions that the only way to get past it would be the Helmet of Disjunction, and the quest for the helmet begins, bringing the group to the previously mentioned battlefield, and then the Underdark. The helmet ends up not helping the crew with their mission, as they use it to walk directly into a trap, but it plays a huge role in Simon's character arc. A character arc that's cleverly connected to the game's mechanics. Being a sorcerer, Simon gets his magic from his bloodline, as opposed to a god like most clerics, or knowing how to read like a wizard. Because of this, it makes sense that his ancestor would play a role in his arc, and influence his ability to cast spells. As well as this, in-game, a sorcerer's spellcasting modifier is determined by their charisma stat. So the higher their charisma, the better sorcerer they are. Simon notably lacks any charisma, because of his low self-esteem. We see that he's capable of casting high-level spells like telekinesis, but he's still a struggling sorcerer because he rolls really low whenever he tries. So having one of his ancestors play a key role in his development and pushing him to overcome his confidence issues is quite clever.
I won't allow it.
I don't care! Sorry.
Another gameplay mechanic they play with is attunement. In-game, attuning to an item is simply about resource management, but in the film, it's pivotal to Simon's character arc. Attuning to the helmet requires him to overcome his own self-doubt issues, and in doing so becomes a more powerful wizard, who's able to counterspell Sofina's time stop at the end of the film. Another character who should be investing in charisma is Edgin. As a bard, he would generally be very good as the face of the party, aka the person who does all the talking, and should be able to convince NPCs to let them do what they want. Bards also have an ability called Bardic Inspiration, which lets him add an extra dice to another party member's dice rolls. The fact that Edgin is giving inspirational speeches throughout and reassuring the party of their abilities could be a fun reference to that. But the characters in the big moments in the story aren't the only ones drawing inspiration from the game. Many small moments throughout the story are directly influenced by the gameplay mechanics. When Edgin and Holga go to recruit Simon from his show, all the spells he casts are actually from the game. Prestidigitation is likely the spell he uses for the freshly cut grass smell. Produce Flame would be the fire on his finger, but I think the most interesting one is his use of telekinesis. Simon using telekinesis hints that he's a pretty competent sorcerer, as in game it is a 5th level spell, so his issue is just self-confidence. The sequence also serves as the first of many examples of the film respecting the game's concentration mechanic. In-game, it's usually taking damage or being incapacitated that will break a character's concentration. But surprise is as good of a reason as any for the movie. Another example of concentration breaking is when Simon's illusion of Edgin falls apart while sneaking into Castle Neverwinter. Or in the final fight, when Doric hits Sophina and the stone dragon stops moving. But if you need something to concentrate on, you can check out my 5-part comedy crime miniseries Midlands Mayhem, which you can watch right now for free on midlandsmayhem.com. Simon's showcase has a few other references to gameplay mechanics. When he's tackled to the ground, he can't cast a spell because his mouth is covered. This is because in D&D, verbal components are used for most spells, and one of the best ways to shut down a wizard is to trap them somewhere that sound doesn't travel. Many jokes in the film are also enhanced by having knowledge of the lore. When Edgin is pleading his and Holga's case to have their prison sentence shortened, he keeps mentioning that an Aarakocra named Jarlathan will be especially sympathetic to his story, and will want him to go free. In the lore of the game, Aarakocra are bird-like humanoids who generally don't understand ownership and are terrified of confinement. Knowing this, you would assume Edgin wants Jarlathan there because he probably doesn't believe that anyone should be imprisoned, and will vote in favor of letting Edgin go free. But when he shows up, they just grab him and jump out a window, hoping he'll stop them falling to their death, which is funny by itself. Another gag is when the intellect devourers pass the party in the Underdark. The paladin Zank says they feed on intelligence, and then the party is promptly ignored by the monsters. Now it's funny in itself because character's stupid, but every class that is featured in the party has no need for a high intelligence stat in the actual game. Those classes being a bard, druid, sorcerer, and barbarian. When you're creating a character for any of these classes in the group, you would probably dump your intelligence, so you can have a higher charisma or strength. In this same scene, the party are traveling through the Underdark, but only Edgin and Holga have lanterns. This is because Simon and Doric, being a half-elf and a tiefling respectively, would have dark vision, which, as the name implies, allows them to summon Dark Magician without any tributes. But some references are just visual, like the arena in the High Sun games being segmented into squares like a D&D battle map. It's a small touch, but a fun one. While we're on the topic of battles, the action sequences in the movie are very inspired by the tabletop RPG. When it comes to the monsters, every single one of them occupy a page in the monster's manual. We see the party dealing with gelatinous cubes, displacer beasts, and maybe the most iconic monster in D&D, a mimic. Actually, they're probably the second most iconic. During the flashback where Holga's tribe battles against the Thayans, we see a dragon spraying acid over the battlefield. In D&D, a dragon's breath attack is determined by its color. This is a black dragon, so it breathes acid, unlike a red dragon that would breathe fire. Speaking of red dragons, later in the film, the group encounters a dragon in a dungeon. Themberchaud is a big fat red dragon that we see chomping on the Thayan warriors that came after the group. He has his own massive backstory in the game, but we're here to talk about what he does in the movie. He tries to roast the party. This sequence has a lot of fun moments of the dragon struggling to climb things, knocking platforms off balance, and rolling after the heroes because it's too rotund to walk. But one aspect that is interesting is the fact that the dragon is struggling to use the breath attack. This could be inspired by the mechanic used to balance dragon encounters. After a dragon uses its breath attack, it must roll a d6 to recharge it. On a 5 or a 6, the dragon can use the attack again, but anything else, and it can't. Now this may be more inspired by the fact that the dragon is fat and can't breathe, but both could be true. Another great showcase of the game's mechanics inspiring an encounter is the party's fight against Sophina at the end of the film. We see Sophina casting many spells from the game, like Meteor Swarm, Otiluke's Resilient Sphere, and Animate Object. Like I mentioned before, she loses concentration on a spell after Doric hits her, and later the party beats her down one at a time as if they were moving in order of initiative. However, the most D&D part of this fight is the way Edgin completely ignores Sofina's evil villain monologue to crack a joke. Every DM ever knows what I'm talking about. But Sofina's fighting style isn't the only one enhanced by game mechanics. Simon casts many spells from the game, like Bigby's Hand and Magic Missile. Hulga, I think, has to have taken the Tavern Brawler feat, which gives increased damage with improvised weapons, like potatoes. There's also Doric's Wild Shape ability, which leads to one of the most fun action sequences in the film, even if she breaks some rules during it. Doric's chase sequence is a visual spectacle. In one continuous shot, she changes into several different animals as she attempts to flee the city. In this sequence, she uses far more wild shape transformations than a druid should have access to. It's usually 2, but I can forgive this clear transgression because it's fucking awesome. The sequence starts when Sofina rolls a nat 20 perception check and realizes that Doric has been spying on her disguised as a fly. Doric then flies through a small hole into a wall, escaping Sofina's chain lightning spell, before transforming into a rat and running off. Doric then squeezes into a suit of armor, changes back into a human, and fails a persuasion check on a passing soldier. Her armor is destroyed, and she leaps out of a window as a rat before changing into a falcon and tries to fly out of the city. She changes into a cat to soften her fall as she dive bombs down a chimney and then tries the Marvel disguise method. Then she turns into an axe beak to fit in with the crowd, and after being caught, changes into a deer to make it out of the city. This sequence breaks the rules of D&D, but that's okay. The writers knew when it was the right time to abide by the rules and when to drop them for a fun sequence. Because the film is not a game. The film is a film, and a pretty good one at that. This approach allowed them to do something that every DM thought was impossible, making a really good chase sequence. Doric also shouldn't be able to turn into an owlbear, but who cares? The film's directors clearly did their homework. They said in a Collider interview that it was important for them to make the fans feel seen, and believe me, I feel seen. They took a lot from the game, in a way that would still make the film accessible to people who have never played it. I think they did a great job at filling the script with references to Dungeons & Dragons lore, but also using gameplay mechanics to inspire character stories and action sequences. There's many conversations online trying to figure out what subclasses or what homebrewed mechanics are at play, and I think very few adaptations can spark something like this. This movie feels less like an adaptation of some source material and more like an actual Dungeons & Dragons campaign taking life on screen, with 4 players all trying to be the funny one, and the DM thinking on their feet when their players ignore the plot to talk to the barbarian's ex. But most importantly, this film has Hugh Grant being hit by a potato.